I'll start off by introducing myself. My name's Sara Hely. I'm the Director of Research at Riverine Plains, which is also the lead of the Northeast node for the Drought Hub, and we'll talk a bit more about that shortly. I'm a trained scientist. I studied climate change, so this is obviously an area of interest to me, and it's been quite a while that I've actually done science in the field, but I have been working with farmers every day for quite a while now, so I will share some insights with you. But I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we meet today, the Dja Dja Wurrung people, and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. So welcome to the Victorian Drought Hub think tank today. The topic of today is, are we drought ready? But we'll be exploring climate adaptation with a number of different organisations, local government and various agencies that are represented in the regions. I've worked in this space, like I said, for the last 20 years, and I believe now that farmers are no longer climate denialists. I've grounded my experience by working with farmers, and it really strikes me that 20 years ago, when some of the impacts of climate change were becoming more public, that farmers did treat that with a healthy level of scepticism, understandably. For policymakers, it was fairly clear. The science had spoken. There was a lot of movement. The ratification of the Kyoto Protocol that Australia signed on to, and agreement to a number of greenhouse gas emission targets. So we saw rapid progress. I feel like in the last 10 years, though, those roles have somewhat reversed. And for good and bad. Most farmers these days have now seen and witnessed climate change, and they are rapidly trying to look for ways to make sure that their natural asset is protected for future generations. They've weathered storms, figuratively and literally, and maybe many change makers or policy makers in the room, there are many of you in the room today. So we have an opportunity, and transformational change is difficult for farmers to make. So it really needs to start at the policy and the framework part of how we help the farming communities adapt to climate change. So as a member of a farming systems group, a member-based not-for-profit, I feel a responsibility to look for innovative ways to adapt to climate change on behalf of our farmers. And I believe the other farming systems groups represented in this room feel the same way. We believe that we have a role to trial the most innovative R&D available and to let farmers decide what will fit their individual enterprises. I see your roles today to set that policy framework, to look at what's already being done, what we could do more, and where are the opportunities to action or build projects of collaboration. I'll explain a bit more shortly about how today will run, but to give a bit of a local context on this issue and insight into the city of Bendigo, I'd like to welcome Andrea Metcalf from the City of Greater Bendigo to do a welcome to today's event. Thank you.
I have to take the glasses off. So thank you everyone for the invitation to join you today for this important local think tank. To begin, I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are standing on today, the Dja Dja Wurrung, and pay my respects to leaders and elders past, present and future. And for the people that are online, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners in the areas that you're at too. I'd like to thank Jackson for leading us in the smoking ceremony today. We have much to learn from our traditional owners about managing our environment, both in good and challenging times. And I'd also like to acknowledge our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Dr. Jen Alden, who's here today and who will be on the panel I won't be able to stay. I'm off to a couple of other events today. But Jen will be here and she'll report back to us as a council. While we are currently recovering from the impacts of La Nina, earlier this year the Bureau of Meteorology made the prediction we could see a return of the hot and dry El Nino weather system. Whether this means widespread drought will again be upon us remains to be seen. However, as our climate continues to warm, it is a reality we must prepare for, as we will inevitably encounter drought again at some point. Today is a great opportunity to turn our thinking towards the future and consider how we can bolster our resilience in the face of a continuously changing climate. Thank you to the event organisers, Deakin University and the Victoria Drought and Innovation Hub for visiting our region and engaging our community in this important discussion. I'm delighted to welcome you all to Bendigo, and thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. So this think tank is only possible as a result of significant investment from the Commonwealth Government into the Future Drought Fund and the Victorian Drought and Innovation Hub. Our farmers tell us that the use of the word drought right now can actually cause them to disengage. And some of you in this audience might be thinking the same thing after the season that Andrea was touching on that we've just had. This is understandable. There were significant losses to production, particularly across the northeast where we are from, and there has been a fairly significant impact on farmers' mental health as a result. So you might be wondering why we're focusing on drought and how this relates to the discussion today. The good news is I have Michael Tausz here to help explain that and why we talk about drought in terms of the 4 stages of drought. So the Drought Hub, although has that in the title, really talks about the stage in a drought, the stage leading up to a drought, the drought that's not a drought, as in good times, and then the who knows whether we're going into drought or not. So those are the 4 stages that, as very early on in the piece, the Drought Hub was very clear about saying this is not just about those really hard dry times, this is about the 4 cycles. So I'd like to bring Michael up, Michael Tausz, the Director of the Victorian Drought and Innovation Hub, to take us through what the Drought Hub is and what we are doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sara, and good day or good morning all. I'm Michael Tausz. I'm at the University of Melbourne, and I'm the Director of the Victoria Drought Resilience Adoption and Innovation Hub, as is the official original title. This is funded as one of 8 such hubs by the federal government program through the Future Drought Fund. So there are 8 hubs that form by now a tight network nationally, and the Victoria Hub is originally conceived from a consortium, and you see the logos of the members here on the screen. The 4 Victorian universities that have strong regional engagement, that is Deakin University, Federation, La Trobe, and the University of Melbourne, which is where I'm from, Agriculture Victoria, and then 5 regional farming organizations or regional innovation centers that are our regional nodes, the ear on the ground to the region and the action on the ground in the regions. I think I need to point out that this is a fairly unique thing in Victoria especially, but also across Australia, that these organizations do really anything together in this group is probably already a big achievement, rather than going into our usual competition about everything. So the Drought Hub is not quite, I think, 3 years in action, and we are still figuring out some things, how they work, but this is a great example here how it will work. So Deakin University is running our knowledge broker team, and they organized this event here. And in the 5 regional nodes, you see the geographic distribution here. Many of them have representatives here. So Sara, of course, is of the northeast node here, the number 6. Fiona is here from the northwest node, the number 4. And somewhere I saw Rebecca from our node number 5. And we cover all across Victoria, more or less densely, all industries, and we talk about drought resilience. So really that's an important point. I finish with this, that it's not about drought response. We have to talk about the next drought, or even more generally about the next climate extreme event at any times, because we want to be prepared. It's about drought preparedness, about climate resiliency and climate preparedness, not about response when we are already in panic mode. And with this, I want to give back to Sara.
Thank you. We're moving really fast. This is good, I think. So thanks, Michael. I think that gives us, well, that image up there is a really nice way of visualising how the Drought Hub works with the farming systems groups. Just by way of insight, Riv Plains, because we are situated right on the border, also have involvement with the New South Wales Drought Hub, or the Southern New South Wales Drought Hub. It's quite a different model. So what we've experienced in Victoria was a very much a grassroots, ground up approach, which really empowers the farming systems groups to make decisions on behalf of our communities that we represent. It is obviously tricky because there are so many different agencies that could be doing what we're doing, and we need to get across that and represent them. So having representatives of you all, those organisations here today, will be really insightful for us to get feedback on, could we do it better? Are we doing it well? Does anyone know about this Drought Hub? So we're really looking forward to those insights. So as Michael said, the think tank concept did come from the Knowledge Broker team at Deakin University, who are a partner in the Drought Hub. And how this came about is that very early on, the nodes, the regional nodes or the farming systems groups, had to do some extensive consultation. So we put quite a lot of resource into just going out there and talking to farmers. Since then, we continued this consultation, but it has happened more organically through our events, through things that have been stimulated from those early consultations and the development of projects. What we were hearing fairly early on is some really consistent themes that were not easy to convert into projects or scope up into opportunities between either Drought Hub participants or with our existing networks. We recognised those issues were quite complex, they were important, and they required further investigation to really nut out what might be the action areas or projects areas we could advance. And hence the idea of the think tank gives us an opportunity to draw upon lots of people's knowledge, experience, and unpack some of those more complex issues. By way of example, we saw themes arrive around mental health, farm business planning, climate change. I'm just trying to think of some of the other ones, but there was probably about 5 or 6 that we went, these are hard. This is going to take more investigation. So that's how climate adaptation at a local level came about. So climate change science has been pretty robust for quite a while now, so that's not new. But what we're seeing, as I said before, is needing to get that local level of adaptation. And that's been very difficult for farmers who, like I said, have very little day-to-day capacity to transform their farms. It's expensive. And also, given how volatile climate is and their world is, they often don't have the mental capacity to be thinking too hard beyond next season. We're seeing a massive shift though. The next generation are obviously very comfortable with the science. They've come through university and high school talking about sustainability. I have a 6-year-old son who knows all about sustainability from what he's learning from childcare, not even at the school age. So now we're starting to see this wonderful transition of knowledge about climate change, but How is that going to get translated into action with our farmers? And that has been a really tricky thing because we need to balance environment with productivity and society. So we're going to explore today what is being done at the local level. Sorry, Kirsten, I am not referring up to your beautiful slide. This is our nice schematic of how the think tank works, so hopefully this will be consistent. So we'll explore what's being done, what needs to be done, and how can the Drought Hub facilitate what we could do or to help. And we'll hear from 3 panels. So we'll start off with really just getting all of this information out and do a bit of brainstorming. I will then this afternoon, a subset of this group will come into what we're calling a closed session, and that's really just to help us be a bit more agile in designing or identifying action areas. So I'll facilitate that this afternoon with those who have registered so that we can try and find avenues for collaboration so we can advance stuff. I'm hoping at the end of that we'll get 3 to 5 really clear areas of action or projects that we can collaborate on and move forward. For those of you online, there's plenty of opportunity for you to participate too. Those here can ask questions. We'll have some roving mics, and I think the important thing to note is that they won't hear your question unless you say it into a mic. So when you put your hand up, someone will run over really fast and give you a mic so those online can hear it. And then those online can also participate via the chat. So plenty of opportunity. I think what will be really helpful though for myself for this afternoon and for all of the panel is just knowing who's in the room. We've obviously seen your registrations, but I think particularly because at the end of the day, I really encourage you to identify one person that you'd like to go and make a network with. So knowing who's here will be really useful for you. Hopefully the technology will support us in that we'll be able to put up a QR code, there it is, and you'll be able to take that, put that on your phone and then enter in who you are, and we'll get a little schematic of those. And I encourage those online to do that as well because we'd love to know who's listening and what sectors you represent. So we've got 5 or so minutes to do that. Thank you. So I'll just do a bit of running commentary for 1 more minute while this lands for those who don't have a device, which is rare, but hey, local government at the moment represents 33%, catchment management authorities 14%, state government organisations 14%, academic or policy makers or policy researchers are 14%, farming systems or farmer groups 10%, and 4% as community organisations. Fantastic. So a really nice spread of what I would call policy makers or change makers in the room. So big responsibility there.